right. Thank you, Luke, for reminding us of that. So this is the document that I just passed out to everybody here, and it's the general comprehensive plan subcommittee schedule. And so what we have here is generally what each committee will be working through over the next couple of months. And so you see in May, our first meeting here, what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about our key topic framework, and that's kind of what everybody probably saw when you signed up for this committee, but we'll go over it again. We'll reference in other committees the 2007 comprehensive plan chapter that's applicable to that subcommittee, but for us, there is no chapter related to accessible government. This is a new one. So we'll go over and actually just kind of present Red Wing's chapter on accessible leadership that this subcommittee is based off of. So I'll have that for you in a few minutes here. Then relevant plans and studies, which is a relatively short list. And I think that that's part of what we'd be looking to subcommittee members for, your experiences with other units of government and how you've seen other governments work well, and maybe some ideas for how we can do the same, if not better, here in Winona. And then also the relationship of this topic to others in the comprehensive plan. So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end of this meeting. Then later on in May, by the end of the day today, before we head out, we'll schedule a second meeting for the end of May. And then we'll move into June for our third meeting in the first part of June. And then in the second part of June, we have a speaker coming in that'll talk about investing in the city in a fiscally responsible manner. And I think it really gets to the importance of investing in redevelopment and built areas of the city, kind of like we were talking about ahead of time, Ken. Then in July and August, we'll be taking a look at recommendations through goals and objectives. So it would be the purview of this subcommittee to put together goals and objectives related to accessible government. And then those goals and objectives, staff would complete strategies based on those goals and objectives. And by August, our aim is to identify one spokesperson from each committee to bring those recommendations forward to the steering committee. From the steering committee, it goes to planning commission, city council. But what we'll do is we'll put together a draft this fall for broad public input. Then we'll have a second draft and then final adoption. So there's a lot of public input and a lot of interaction programmed in as part of this plan. So just going through that, I know we're just meeting for the first time here. So what I'd like to do is kind of back off of the share screen here and just have everybody introduce themselves. I think we'll go around the table first. Of course, I'm Carlos Espinosa, city planner.
Hi, I'm Ken Fritz.
Hi, I'm John Howard, work for the city, more on the environmental side of things.
I'm Sydney Bauerman.
Nick Lemmer.
My name is Luke Sims. I'm one of the city planners that are co-leading the comprehensive plan update.
I'm Sadie Newman.
I'm Brianna Haupt.
I'm Winona Community Foundation. No, I'm Mandy Olson. I have been in Winona for about 15 years. I've served on the Planning Commission, and I'm really excited to be part of this committee. So thank you.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And before we get going any further, and what we wanted to do is ask a couple questions today. We'll ask one right now, and then another in a few minutes here. But what I wanted to pose a question to everybody is, why are you interested in accessible government? What kind of gets you about this topic, and why were you so interested in the subcommittee? I'll go first. I saw what Red Wing did in their plan, and I've just seen so many things happen over the past 13 years since I've been working at the city here in terms of accessibility and the ability for people to interact with the city improve. But I just see like there's so much more opportunity there, and adding a chapter like this to the comprehensive plan, I think, will really help specific departments within City Hall figure out how best to improve relationships with the people that live, work, and visit the city of Winona. So that's why I'm so interested in this, and I'll pass it off to Ken.
Yeah, in my career, I've spent about 40 years in government, and the one thing that I've noticed in that time is most governments, for whatever reason, tend to want to retain and restrict information rather than provide it. And one of the reasons, I think, is because when you provide additional information to the public, you have to explain that information. Typically, people have questions, people want to understand how it relates to other things. And so they tend to ask a lot of questions, and that puts a lot of hardship on the staff because they have to then respond to those things. But during that time that I've been in government, one of the focuses I've had is not only transparency, getting access to government documents and records and so forth, but is to try to create interaction, number one, because usually you want some way to communicate back and forth, but also to provide how to understand government. So it's not so much for me. I mean, I think the accessible part is a kind of a mechanical part where, if you can access public records, you can access, do two-way communications for, get the pothole repaired or getting your point across in a committee or whatever, so that the legislators can decide how to deal with that information, but also being able to understand how things work, because people, and I've seen this as a retired, people are like, they just don't know how things work, and they don't have easy access to it. They have to have someone explain to them, like, how does the process of an election work? What they have? They have a lot of misconceptions because it's kind of shrouded in mystery. That says, well, there's an election this day, there's a precinct this day, but unless you're part of that group, you don't really know what it is. And I've noticed that there are some places that kind of almost approach it as a how-to type thing, where you can understand this is how this process works, and that does help answer questions.
Thank you.
Well, I'm interested in accessible government, partly because, as Kevin said, it's kind of a mystery. I work in government, so I know how things work, but I could see how we could be very confusing and frustrating for trying to get something fixed or repaired and recontact, recall. So that's something I've definitely seen. In my previous career, I worked with a lot of different city governments for environmental permitting, and just knowing that there's a big difference between how things are done, and it's accessible and people can understand it. There's better trust, better outcome for everyone.
I feel like I've just personally been interested in government for a long time, and especially local government, since the decisions that are made locally directly impact your everyday life. And I feel like a lot of times people don't pay attention to the local government and don't get involved, even though it is what has a large impact on your life. And so I think one of the things that I have always been interested in is just like being able to share like my thoughts and opinions on things more easily and accessibly. And I know I've been in Winona for about 7 years now, and I know I've like heard times where like, city council is looking for public comment on some things for decisions. But I feel like I always hear about it super last minute. It's like, oh, there's a meeting tonight. And that's when information is getting shared. And so I know that information is available earlier than that, but just being able to make sure that everybody has access to all of the information about decisions that are being made that affect them, I think. And on a like personal note, I actually just recently got a job at Cotter, and I'll be teaching government. And so I'm excited to like help translate this information to students also and have them be able to actively participate in their government.
We'll be looking to you to teach everybody about government.
There we go.
Well, thanks. So I too work in municipal government. I work for the city of Rochester right now. I'm communications coordinator there. And in the 6 years I've been even at Rochester, we've really come a long way in terms of increasing the accessibility of the work that we do. I had been in state government prior to that, but it was the first time I've been in local government. And what I found was that I worked with a bunch of great people, really well-intentioned, smart, competent people. And unfortunately, sometimes it's misconceptions. Sometimes it's the information not being at the right place at the right time. Other times it's distrust. And then it just kind of can devolve into like a contentious interaction with government that doesn't need to be that way. I think if we did a better job as local government of just explaining what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, I think we can lower the temperature a little bit with the interactions that we have with the public. And That's just me personally. I love to see that because I really do respect the people I work with. And as a communications coordinator, as a guy who's out there defending a lot of the work that we do to the public, it sort of breaks my heart to hear even good people in the community say terrible things about the good people I work with. And it just doesn't need to be that way. I mean, we're they. If I see they in another post where there's like this evil they out there, it's like, who is they? They is your neighbor and your cousin and and your friends, and they just happen to work in government. So anyway, I just am really passionate about the work that happens, and I'd like to see more cooperative attitude. I think we've got some good lessons in Rochester in terms of city's been involved in a lot of this where we're involving those who are most affected by the work we do, having them have a voice at the table early on in the process. Some other tools that we've been using that I think would come in handy as well.
From my perspective, working as staff for city government, one of the things I'd love to see Winona do is take a leadership role in technology usage. We can have building permits online. We can have mapped certificates of appropriateness so somebody can click and see what's happening in a historic district. We currently have a really great tree inventory where you can click on any individual tree and you can see its diameter and whether or not it's been treated for specific pesticides or what have you. I'd love to see that type of detail for every individual component of a city. Obviously, that's a huge ask, but it's really anywhere in between the bare state minimum of our requirements for maintaining records and somehow taking an approach where we really want to serve the public and provide that information as a service. Additionally, I think that there's an equity concern across the board, and this is common across governments, where we need to reach out to people who are typically not involved in the process. So for example, sending out mailers to renters and not just owners of record, for example. There's a real opportunity to breed trust by providing information to people who typically don't get that information and may never even think that they are entitled to that type of information. And then on a side note, my past career was working primarily in universities, getting universities to feel empowered and collaborative with the city of Winona would be a great step forward. I've seen some really strong student governments, for example, that are really able to push their will onto their surrounding community. And that creates a little bit of friction sometimes, but it's also really good because whether or not we care to have students in our community, we're always going to have 4 to 5 years of some rotating population. So there's an opportunity to really develop great institutional legwork there.
For me, this is, like Nick said, something that I work in right now with City of Rochester. We are working on our comprehensive surface water management plan. And I have the unique and really privileged opportunity to be given time to try and do the work to figure out how do you reach out to the communities that don't answer the survey that you put out. Like, how do you go that extra mile to reach out to the umpteen number of communities that's not their way of communicating with their government or even within their own communities. And so I am here to try and offer some of that insight. I'm also here because I have a background in public policy and public service, and my own personal theory throughout my professional experience and academic training is that public service needs to take a shift from being service oriented to empowering the community instead. And so those things that everybody has talked about so far, like providing the right information and providing the education to allow the community themselves to make their decisions, allow each neighborhood to have the information that they need to make the best plans for their neighborhood. And once you have them, being engaged in everything, you have the buy-in, you have the political will, and you have, everything that you need behind the continued maintenance of a project, which is another factor that prevents us from doing things. So, I think by breaking my pen, prioritizing inclusion, we're going to have to look at also the capacity of our local government, which I think might be one of the hardest conversations that we'll have, because that takes into account time and money for resources as well as expertise. Not too many people like in the US have the expertise in inclusion and engagement at the level that I think we're all envisioning for the kind of place that we want to live in. And I also, I think tech is extremely underutilized. You know, especially coming from academia most recently, where you are given like free access to a suite of a number of different software, and you can just play and see what you can do. I found that we can do incredible things with automating a lot of things. So it makes it easier. So we're not hung up on, well, we can't provide that information because that would take somebody to update things. Well, you don't have to. You literally don't have to. The computers can do it themselves. They're smart. And so I'm really happy to be here, and I see a lot of untapped partnerships within this community.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll go with Brianna.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I would say that, this subcommittee ties into some of my past, work experience. I have experience at Home and Community Options and currently teach at Riverway Learning Community. And so I, have spent a lot of time making sure that things are accessible to students and individuals that I work with. As well as making sure needs are being met, across a wide variety of people. And so I see it tying in really closely with that work that I'm currently doing. For instance, some of my students just did a project where they created art about a cause that they cared about, and some of them emailed it to certain city staff. And within a couple days, the mayor was in our classroom to answer questions for them and speak to them about their, concerns. So it was really, just exciting for them and exciting for me to see it in action. And so I hope to bring more of that to my school community. But yeah, personally, I really started watching the council meetings during the pandemic, and I love unwinding with the council meeting on a Monday. That is my truth. And so it's just really got me thinking about all the possibilities, that are out there in terms of just having a link to those meetings and other happenings within the city. And I'm sure I'm the minority in that capacity, but I think there might be other more exciting things for people that they would be interested in watching if the link was just provided, easily for them. So that's why I'm here. I'm excited to learn more, and it sounds like we've got a great group of folks to work with. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi. So, wow, you guys are had amazing things to say. I honestly was just thinking this was going to be about who do you contact to get a pothole covered. So I'm really excited to get to know all of you and understand what the needs of this committee are. I have a general desire and passion for civic engagement. So that's kind of why I was involved more than the specific subcommittee. But I would echo that I feel like there are barriers for the accessibility of government, including just some of the antiquated ways that government works right now. Like I just saw a little ad in the classifieds, and I know that's all government's required to do is put a little ad in a newspaper classified section. And I really truly wonder how many people even know that or read the classifieds. So yeah, kind of bringing accessibility into the 21st century, but also with that touch of what's the equitable part, because not everyone has a smartphone, not everyone has the internet or access to it. So I'll be really interested to hear everyone's thoughts and excited to be in this committee. So thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Mandy. And let's make sure I'm not pulling up the wrong stuff here. Okay. All right, so what we'll do is we're going to transition a little bit to the framework for this committee. And I'll pass it out to those who are in attendance here. And really what this framework is just kind of a summary of the gist of the committee. And so what we're looking to do through this committee is addressing ways to maintain and enhance connections between residents and city government. And again, you'll see reference community connections and accessible leadership from the 2019 Red Wing Comp Plan. We'll pass it out in just 1 minute here. So some examples of discussion and focus areas that we saw at least coming into this. And it reflects a lot of what was said here. In addition to that, also increasing participation in city boards, commissions and council, getting fresh faces, fresh, perspectives. That's something that I think that we really truly need, not just really throughout the city when it comes to not just city council, but sub-city council as well. So planning commission, heritage preservation commission, fine arts commission, our board of adjustment, for instance. They're all volunteer committees, but they do some really important stuff for all of us here. So to be able to get a more representative sample of people and get more people involved will be wonderful. Also getting the word out about city activities. I think our Park and Rec department does great when it comes to that, but I think other departments could use some work. Specific outreach to BIPOC and youth, so the traditionally either unrepresented or hard to access in terms of bringing into the fold with government, especially at a local level. Templates and considerations and contacts for resident initiated projects on city property. So you want to do something in the city here and then, it's in a park. You want to do something out in your street to, have a, what do they do? The night out, national night out. You want to do that. How does that work? So people have a better idea of how to get a hold of the city government and be able to do things with all the city property that we have. Then you'll see some other bullet points, taking a look at public participation processes, resident communication with full council. And I think that that's coming forward too with the public comment at city council meetings. So that's something that we are actually addressing right now, which I think has been beneficial for us. Then overall committee product, again, we'll be looking at for this subcommittee to provide recommendations for inclusion in the comp plan. Our calendar is at the bottom there. I already kind of went through that. In addition to what you see here, we'll also talk about really at our next meeting, key themes from the comprehensive plan phase 1 public engagement. And that's on the flip side of the papers that you have in front of you or up on the screen here. And this, even though it's a relatively short, one pager, this is what we heard from the community during the first phase 1 of public engagement for the comprehensive plan, where we talked to over 2,000 people about what they want to see for their city in the next 20-25 years here. And so this is what they had to say, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the next meeting. In addition to that, we'll also talk about at the next meeting what the steering committee has kind of chimed in terms of accessible government and some input that they've given so far. And you'll see that that's up on the screen right now, and I'll pass it out for those that are here. And so again, in addition to the subcommittee, the steering committee took a look at this as well, and just preliminarily provided some ideas of how we could increase accessibility when it comes to government. And so we'll dive into this a little bit more at the next meeting, but I wanted to make sure that everybody has it at their disposal. And so for those that are on Zoom, as I mentioned previously, we'll have a section on our city website, and we'll have all these documents in one spot so that you can take a look at them going into our next meeting here. And we'll send that link out after the meeting here. And so you'll have access to those. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing right there. And next we'll move into the 2007 chapter, which for us is that Red Wing plan. And I'll go ahead and pass it out here. All right. So this chapter is from the 2019 Red Wing Plan, and it's the Red Wing 2040 Community Plan. So we're looking out to 2045, so we're even more future oriented. But in any case, the vision statement for them: all of us feel welcome, connected, represented, and encouraged to shape our community's future. And really, that's what we're looking to do here, is increase that connection between residents and people who work for the city of Winona, as well as those who are elected officials. You'll see they have a nice introduction here, and they get into specific things that where they heard, what would make Red Wing a better place to live, better communication and engagement, the youth community and welcoming center, speaking to the importance of community centers in individual cities, programs, event activities and events, which I think we do very strongly here, but how do we bring more people to those events that we put so much time and effort in? Some different things that people like most about living in Red Wing, and what they like to see in the city as well. And they have kind of a report card here. And really, this is something that provides some background information. And what we'd ask subcommittee members to do is, between this meeting and next meeting, take a look at this section from Red Wing's plan and let us know about any what you think about it. If there were specific things in it that resonated with you, and some things that you think may be applicable to the city of Winona. And how we could do things in the future. And so that's why we wanted to provide it to you, so that you're able to take a look at what they have in terms of goals, strategies, and actions, and see what type of additions you think that we could add for the city of Winona. And if there's any other things, any other ideas that this document might trigger for inclusion in our comprehensive plan. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing there, and I'll just kind of open it up and see if there are any questions on these documents that we just passed out, or just what we're asking you to do between this meeting and the next meeting.
Two questions, I guess. One is about scope. So one of the things that I'm working on is also, as a part of this public participation, not only what level do they participate at, but also at what point in the process do they participate. And City of Rochester is really looking to move into the co-design method for all of their participation, which means city staff acts more as like experts and facilitators instead of planners and decision makers so much. It means that before you even write down plans for a project, you identify an issue, and then you bring in the public right away. And you ask them about their experiences, their concerns, their hopes, their desires, their vision, things like that. And you work from there. Is this a part of the accessible government committee?
Definitely. And I think what we can do with an idea like that is, you'll see a lot of, and kind of what we presented here is, there's a lot of actions. There's a lot of things that, we think that, the city of Winona could potentially do in the future. And that's part of what we want to talk about. But what we really want to do, and what we're really looking for as part of this planning effort, is to kind of take a step back and look at everything from a 30,000-foot viewpoint and say, all right, is there the ability for certain areas of what the city does to be more participatory, more citizen design oriented versus, top-down administrative oriented? And so that might be an approach that would come into the plan as a recommendation, saying that in the future, the city should examine ways within their current activities, which ones may be appropriate for that type of citizen engagement.
Mhm.
Because not everything is going to lend itself well to that. In terms of, you can think of a number of different, potential examples, but just because we don't do it now doesn't mean we can't do it in the future. And so, yes, I definitely think that would come into play here. And so I can see, instead of looking at a specific recommendation for specifically things that the city can or can't do, what the committee approach would be is for the city to take a look at how that could be incorporated into the future. And that's what we're trying to do with all of the committees, is harvest as many good ideas as we can to inform just general goals and objectives for us over the next 20-25 years. So, second question?
Yeah, just, can you tell us again what our expectations are for us to do before the next meeting?
Yes, so the Red Wing 2019
Uh-huh.
plan, take a look at it, let us know what you like, what you don't like.
Oh, okay, it's just overview. It's not like reach out to other people and bring back stuff.
Comments, questions, concerns,
Yep.
anything you think that Red Wing might not have done well, or you think could be improved.
Okay,
And it's worth, asking yourself the same questions that they asked. They heard from a significant portion of their population. They had over 1,000 responses during their public engagement, if I remember correctly, based on this document. And we've had over 2,000 responses in our phase 1 engagement thus far. So we're both hitting about 10% of our total populations, which is a really great engagement process. But I mean, even that engagement process might not be as empowering, to Sadie's point earlier, so much as informing. So how can we make sure that we're working on that ladder of engagement to make sure that even this process, the Accessible Government Committee, feels very citizen driven and resident driven. And because a lot of comprehensive plans don't necessarily include a section on accessible government, we are grabbing from Red Wing's plan here, but we are kind of trying to tailor this specifically to Winona as well. What works for Winona might not work for other communities, and what works for other communities might not work for us. So we want to kind of see if there's a disparity that we can kind of tease out early on. And you all are our working group to help us do that. So we did cover this very, very briefly. You guys all have a printout online. We are going to put it online as well. That subcommittee section is in the same area as the comprehensive plan update on our city website under planning and zoning. And we'll send out an email with this documentation as well. So for those of you who like to live your digital lives and not kill all of the trees, can do so.
But yeah, if you're looking at the ladder of participation, I would say that this is one of the most participatory. What we're doing right now is one of the most participatory functions that we are going to be doing. And that cities do undertake is this base level comprehensive plan and the goals and objectives that this subcommittee, as well as all the other subcommittees, are working on.
awesome.
Yep. So you are in the driver's seat. We're just helping you to provide the information. So.
Any other questions or comments on documentation thus far?
You'll also include the results of phase 1 in that same section?
Yep.
Okay.
And just a note on that, so we do have reports on phase 1 already available, and Engage Winona keeps all of their documentation on their website because we partnered with Engage Winona for that.
Mhm.
So if you do want additional individual responses, you'll be able to get it at that point there as well. So just let me know if you feel like that's inadequate, or let Carlos and I know, and we'll be able to track something down for you or point you in the right direction at a minimum.
Okay.
Is there a priority for the city? I'm just reviewing the example of discussion topics, and,
Yep.
and I'm sure you're kind of welcoming our sort of natural way to uncover what we see as the priorities, or whether or not we'd like to include some topics or focus areas that maybe aren't on this list. But before we do that, I see increasing participations at the top of every list I've read so far. So I'm getting the gist that this is a priority for the city. Are there any other priorities, like things you really want us to take a look at, or
I would say that all the bullet points here would be things that we think that we could do and improve upon. Yeah, I guess the answer to that question too, on the other hand, is that we don't have anything right now. And that's what this committee is hopefully helping us to do, to have something when somebody says, what is your priority when it comes to interacting with your residents? And so that's kind of what we're here to do to a certain extent too.
And sorry, just to add to that all of the above situation, this is a document that will be in place for 10 to 15 years for our community. So we intend to chip away at these goals and objectives over time. It might not be one fell swoop right away. So please make our plate very full so that we have things to work on for a decade.
And just looking over this list, the first thing that comes to mind, I'll just take the first bullet point.
Yep.
I'm curious to know, what are the number of commissions? What are the number of people at commissions? What's the typical vacancy rate? What's turnover rate? Things like that. Just the current conditions of some of these would be nice to have just a summary of from staff.
Sure.
I'm not trying to make a lot of work for
No.
anybody, but just kind of so that we understand the context.
Yeah, just kind of expand on that. I'd actually looked into that before and got a little information from the city because it was one of my concerns in terms of turnover. Because we don't have turnover in committees, no new blood comes in. You have some turnover, but you don't have a lot. But beyond that, I noticed, like you mentioned, National Night Out, for instance.
Yep.
There are things that the community maybe is involved in that I don't know. I mean, I know National Night Out, I know what it is, but I don't know that the city of Winona was actually involved in it. Now you mentioned it, sounds like it is. So are you involved in it or aren't you involved in it? There are a lot of things like that on a national, that I would say, well, here's an idea. And you say, well, we already do that.
Mhm.
And so without kind of having, and I know it's kind of hard to define for you guys to tell us what we don't know.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, there are things that you're already doing, I guess.
Well, and that's too why, I think at the next meeting, we'd ask Monica Hennessy Mohan to be with us and kind of help to, frame what the city currently does right now in terms of, communication and interaction. And because she is the one that is kind of the go through for all of the committee memberships as well.
It's not just
I
the
think
committees,
that'll
I mean,
help.
that'll help on the committee side,
Yep.
but I think more so is there, I guess, how do we know what is actually sponsored or, the city's involved in directly?
Sure.
Like I know, like, okay, the barbecue thing, it's the chamber, is the city, is that something the city's doing? Is it, what things are actually going on in the city that may or may not be known by all of us? I mean, I don't know. I'd say, like, for instance, is there a city newsletter? I don't think there's one, but I'm not saying we should have one, but I'm just saying, I don't even know that.
Well, and I can see what you're getting at too, that, having a readily accessible list of kind of what activities the city does do and which ones we don't would be a good point of
Yeah, I
information.
mean, at least
for
the
people to have.
kind of major ones,
Yep.
Yeah, you mentioned that the park district gets out, or the parks department gets out a lot of information, which I do see some of that.
Yep.
But do other departments do that? Because I don't see those.
Not to the level that they do.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
not much going on, but
Yeah.
You see things on occasionally, what I see from MDOT on road construction.
Yep.
What does the city do? Is that just social media? Is it other places? Is it,
Yep. Definitely. All right.
It's all might be.
Yeah.
Authority.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Complain to Mike all the time.
All right. Any question from those in Zoom? All right.
Do you need are there more topics for today, or could I have a couple other questions?
No more topics. Go right ahead.
So another thing is be helpful for me to understand kind of like the old Cubby begin with the end in mind sort of thing. What do you see these final goals and objectives actually looking like? Like everybody probably has 7 different definitions of what a goal is, what an objective is, what a strategy is, right? So it would be nice to begin with what you understand to be a kind of a working definition. So what's a goal?
Yep.
What should a goal look like? What's an objective? What should an objective look like? It's just so that as we begin these conversations, we can start, getting them into the right number of buckets and
Definitely, and I think that that's where other subcommittees have the advantage of having a previous comp plan. Yeah, for which we think the design of the previous comp plan is really straightforward, easy to, read
So we got a
and
template.
understand, a
Okay.
template. But that's also something that we can give to this committee, just an example of another section, just so you have a better idea, definitely.
No, I was just gonna say that that's the kind of thing that I would like to see, because I didn't know how far, you were talking about scope, and in a comp plan, a lot of times it's, improve opportunities for people to be in leadership roles. Well, great, are we gonna talk about how to get there?
Yes.
You know?
Yep, definitely.
The other one I was thinking about is, in terms of city departments, sometimes there's I'm thinking about police, for example, is what's coming to mind right away is sometimes there's a sort of a wall about these city departments and whether or not a comprehensive plan touches all departments or not quite all departments. I think Rochester's PD does a fantastic job of working with the community, like unbelievably good job. And it fosters a lot of really positive relationships with the community. So I'm curious, I guess my specific questions about police, but are there any borders, like which departments this might affect? This obviously will affect Monica a lot, but
Well, when you say that, that's why I asked about National Night Out. I mean, how much do we participate? Do we participate in it, number one? Or do we just tell people, yeah, you can participate, you can have your blocked off and you can do whatever you want, you don't have a part, but are the police actively involved? And, or are, do we have a citizens police academy? Bring people in and show them how things work in the police department and get them more engaged with the community. So they have people that are ambassadors out there talking about the police department and how good of a job they're doing and why they do things. But I don't know some of those things we don't do. I don't know what we do and don't do again. So, I'm it's not because of a lack of trying. I mean, I'm fairly plugged in, so, I mean, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And to answer your question, Nick, this is completely a comprehensive plan. So if we do have recommendations for public safety, for example, who, maybe already are doing a lot of these things, we do want to include them in this plan. We're not intending to just have this be accessible government for just those in city halls building, for example. And it does need to be a fairly cohesive planning part of our planning document, because otherwise we are going to kind of have some departments who just kind of are dragged along. We don't want that. We want it to feel like the city is moving together.
How about elected officials? Are elected officials sort of under, and can we help them sort of shape their approaches or roles that they might play in this concept as well?
Yep.
Okay. Sometimes, when it comes to elected officials oftentimes their roles are written into city code or statute and so forth. So, but also I think it can evolve or be interpreted in different ways.
Definitely.
Sorry.
No.
Questions.
No.
Questions are good. That's what this meeting is for.
Some things I would love to know at next meeting are what are staff and elected official onboarding like? Are they required? What happens if somebody can't make it, especially if it's a group thing? What are the cities and council's accountability to following this plan that we are creating? What is the kind of language that we need to be using if we are saying like this is a priority, or if we're saying this should be a guide? What is the hiring process and candidate evaluation like? What are the priorities of the city when hiring staff?
Is the hiring process really part of this role though, or this subcommittee?
I saw on here on one of these about creating more diversity within staff and council. And so that's what prompted that question for me.
Okay, is that the phase 1 document or the Red Wing?
That's actually from the steering committee. It's the second steering committee meeting you want to pull up the post-it notes again for that, Carlos?
Yep.
And we'll pull it up here as well. Or at least that's what you were looking at, Sadie. I'm assuming that's where it was.
Somewhere. I didn't mark it. I'm trying to find it.
Hold on 1 second, my mouse, there we go.
There is a note there on requiring community engagement participation for training and elected officials, onboarding and information.
Oh, this one, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is actually a really good point, is does our city reflect our population and its demographics? Does our city staff, does our city elected officials? How can we be approachable if we aren't, for example? One of the things that I know that I've heard since I moved here about 7 years ago is sometimes it feels like you're always going to be an outsider if you weren't from Winona, right?
Which is funny because how many people here are from Winona originally?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we've been here for 7
Yeah.
years, we've been here like, you know,
You moved away for 20, but then
everybody
I
talks to
came to my
us. So, yeah, it's
senses.
a lot of people like that too, that started here and then moved away.
Everyone comes back eventually.
Yeah,
And we expect, Mandy, that's actually a really good question. We do expect to go through a lot of drafts of this as well. If we decide, the committee, if you all decide that maybe hiring isn't necessarily something that is germane to this topic in the end, then we don't necessarily have to include it in those draft goals,
Yeah.
objectives, and strategies.
And I think that particular paragraph is really two things. One is for your committees and commissions and so forth, the people that have input into the legislative process in a way versus staff. And staff might fall outside the parameters of accessible government. But certainly the makeup of the committee, advisory board and other things like that.
Definitely. Sounds like we can give you some more background information at the next meeting. And we will work to provide that. And we will also kind of delve into a little bit more of what we heard from phase one, as well as taking a look at steering committee recommendations, which is kind of what we just talked about a little bit here.
You said the background to this information, the
Yeah.
detail is available, or you're going to send it out, or it's also available on.
If you would like
On our
the
website.
detail to that, the comments.
Well, more
the
more
individual-
detailed than that. I don't know how do they summarized it, or if you want to give.
We
all
have
the raw
Excel
comments,
spreadsheets
or-
of raw comments.
That sounds good.
We do have an overall summary of engagement as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, just because there's, these are pretty broad. So.
no, we have, so 22 comments. We have all 22 of those comments. You might have to mine a little bit for them, but they're there. So, Marcia at Engagement Owner did a good job of organizing it. So you should be able to navigate the spreadsheet, but the spreadsheet has all the raw data on it.
Yeah, she's done the most phenomenal job of survey organization that I've ever seen.
It's been awesome.
Could you guys send out information about the IQ spectrum to everybody in the
Yep.
committee? There's a handful of us who are probably really familiar with it and some who have never heard of it. So I think it's a nice piece of background information.
I thank you for bringing that up. I think that was my comment, but yeah, I was wondering if we have other like background that we think is pertinent, do you want us to send it out to this group or send it to you to share with the group, like IAP2 stuff, like what is co-design, things
Yeah.
like that?
Sure, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a working group, so we are under no obligation to necessarily only discuss things at this meeting. So it's not necessarily, because you're not an elected body or an appointed body, or appointed like a commission. But yeah, if there's gonna be a cool atmosphere and you have something you want to pass along, we are welcome to do so. I believe all of you are on that email chain.
I was thinking about access to the community meetings because of in the board meeting, there was a public comment issue in the paper and that kind of thing. But can you tell me which committees or I don't know how far to go because I don't know how many, there's a lot of subcommittees, but which committees actually have let's say online access to them? And is that,
Oh,
can you- yeah, for instance, I mean, can you, the planning commission, can you sit in on, I don't know, the zoning committee? I mean, are those actively right now, which, are there comments taken in those? You know, that kind of stuff.
Nope,
I can
generally
try
it's only council.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure you had to do some of that for that, but.
It was different during COVID, but we're back to in person,
Just completely across the board. I mean,
except for council,
Except for
where they have
council.
it on Zoom.
yeah,
But comments and everything like
yeah,
that. are
that's
disabled,
another
so you
issue
gotta-
that there, yeah.
So. All right, well, before we sum up today, I do want to take a look at the next meeting and what might work in people's schedule. So we are on a Tuesday afternoon at 4:30. I think we have pretty good representation here. Does this seem to be a general good time that works for people?
Yes, for me, I would just want to make sure that the people who aren't here don't have a recurring conflict at this time. 'Cause
Yeah.
then that would be fair. But yeah, it works for me.
Were there just two people who couldn't make it today?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, Nick.
Does Tuesdays at 4:30 work for everybody else right now?
Is this?
Yes.
They go every other week. or-
So the goal would be to meet again, maybe on the 24th
Okay.
at 4:30.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If we have recurring conflicts, we will make sure that we reach out again.
Yeah, definitely.
Another doodle.
Another doodle with,
My entire inbox was doodle responses for
Okay.
like 5 weeks.
Oh, I bet.
You guys, staff liaison for all the subcommittees? Or?
for the first meeting, and then for other committees, we're having other people help us with it.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah.
Because I don't want to load you up with
Yeah.
homework if that's the case.
We will be here for this one almost every time.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, everybody, and we'll look forward to meeting again in another couple of weeks here. We'll be in touch.
It's good.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
You.